Few creators in comic history has left a legacy as powerful as John Byrne. From redefining X-Men with legendary arcs like the Dark Phoenix Saga and Days of Future Past, to reinventing Marvel's Fantastic Four, he reshaped Superman with the Man of Steel. He gave us humor and broke the fourth wall in Sensational She-Hulk and helped create unforgettable characters like Alpha Flight and Kitty Pryde. John Byrne has shaped the stories and characters we all love. We'll be looking at the comics of John Byrne's career, how they fare in the marketplace today, and highlight some you may not know. It's all here on Creator Spotlight. John Byrne.
You know, Shane, I keep saying I'm going to make them smaller and less books. And then I find myself just keep making more and more slides. I thought we hit the marker with Neil Adams last week. But no, en contraire. John Byrne has a little bit more.
There's just so many titles that he's touched. It's awesome.
Mm-hmm. With John Byrne, you know, we'll talk a little bit about his biography a little. We'll do his bio in a few minutes, seconds really. He has a hand in recreating characters. So he was Ultimate Spider-Man. He was Absolute Batman before that was even a thing. Now, he was very successful with some, not so much with others. But he's also famous for doing the X-Men alongside Chris Claremont. We'll talk about that today because there is a lot of that going on. Great artist and writer, but he's also very controversial, just like Neil Adams is as well. He doesn't do conventions anymore. He's not a big fan of conventions. He has his opinion on certain things, which we're not going to talk about here, that a lot of people don't agree with as well. But we're going to be looking at his timeline of artwork from his very first all the way to something as recent as I could find. So let's go ahead and do his bio. So John Byrne is a legendary comic book writer and artist who reshaped Marvel's X-Men with iconic arcs like the Dark Phoenix Saga and Days of Future Past, co-creating characters such as Kitty Pryde and Emma Frost. He transformed Fantastic Four with character-driven storytelling, introducing She-Hulk to the team and pioneering fourth wall breaking humor in the Sensational She-Hulk. At DC, Byrne modernized Superman with the Man of Steel and redefined Wonder Woman, introducing Casey Sandsmark as the second Wonder Girl. A pioneer of creator-owned projects like Next Men, Byrne's influence on the comic book industry is unparalleled. In 2015, he was inducted into the Will Eisner Award Hall of Fame for his lasting impact on the medium. Note, he was inducted alongside Chris Claremont, which I could only imagine what that was like. You want to really look at his work, you want to go to burnerobotics.com. That is his website. Yeah, I looked it up too. I was like, oh, that's the official website. Let's go ahead and take a look at some of his early work, and then we'll go into his more famous work. Starting with his first work, E-Man #6 from 1975 from Charlton Comics. High sale of this book is at $120 at 9.6, and that was at April 15, 2021 that it was sold. Last recorded sale was $4. Fair market value of this book is $6, while a 7.0 goes for about $24. This issue contains the first professional comic book work of John Byrne in the Rogue 2000 story. That was no lady. I feel like I gotta say it with some attitude. That was no lady.
Yeah.
So another Charleston comic. What's up with Charleston? They had a little thing where they got superstar artists before they became famous.
Yeah, they were the only game in town, it looks like, for new people.
What's your thoughts on E-Man? I've seen E-Man comic books before in the past.
The logo looks familiar to me, so I might have come across them. I don't remember this cover specifically, though. But again, you know, $4 for first work. Go ahead, take my money.
Yeah, right. Yeah, apparently Charlton Comics at that time, they just kept cramming up new people all the time. And then Marvel and DC, it was kind of like it was the indies, of course, but it was definitely in a time where Marvel and DC were looking at this company, like, these guys got something going on, and we'll latch onto them. Let's take a look at our next book. And this is his first Marvel, which is Giant Size Dracula #5 in 1975. Highest sale of this book was $200. And that was on October 16th, 2021. Last recorded sale of this book was only $5. Fair market value of this book is $19 as a fine and $18 at a 7.5. This is considered his first published artwork for Marvel Comics.
It's pretty amazing. Now, I don't know, is it the cover or is it an interior?
He did interior work.
Another easy book another inexpensive book to pick up. I don't know how easy it is to find.
Yeah, this is probably one of those books that if you go to a convention or if you go online, you'll probably end up finding it. But I'm with you. It may not be so easy. The good news about books like this is that if you find it, chances are that dealer doesn't know why you're taking it, which is a benefit for the buyer.
Oh, yeah.
Unless you're a dealer watching this show and you're like, oh, yeah, I got to take note of this, I got to take note of this, and that's fine. But in all fairness, dealers, they don't get a chance to really look at their material in that way because they have to sell a certain amount. So they're unable to really decide, hey, this is a first John Byrne, this is first Neil Adams, this is first Claremont. Where who would have known Giant Size Dracula was his first Marvel book?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Now we're going to get to some more hotter books. And that's Marvel Premiere 25. This came out in 1975. This had a high sale of $300. However, last recorded sale of this book was $9. Fair market value of this book is $5. $110 and 9.6. This is his first Iron Fist, and Iron Fist will eventually become an important character for John Byrne, especially with some of the books that he's going to be a part of. It's also worth noting that Iron Fist was also a book that someone else was working on alongside John Byrne. Do you know who it is?
No.
A certain gentleman by the name of Chris Claremont. That's the importance here. It's Iron Fist, man. Iron Fist is such a cool character in the 70s. You know, those Kung Fu characters in the 70s were always fun, you know, like Shang-Chi, Masters of Kung Fu. All that stuff was really, really cool in that time period. And this is his first artwork with Iron Fist. Let's move on to our next book in this list, and that is Iron Fist issue number 8. This is not Marvel Premiere. This is Iron Fist. Keep that in mind. This came out in 1976 for Marvel Comics. The highest sale of this book is at $450 at a 9.2, and that was in March of 2023. Last recorded sales value was $5, while fair market value of this book is at $11 fine, $477 at a 9.8. This is an origin of Iron Fist retold. More importantly, this is considered an iconic John Byrne cover.
Yeah, definitely. I love that cover. Love the perspective of it, the logo, all of it. It's good.
Yeah, the foreshadowing, that fist is punching right at you. It's a good cover, and you know, $11, I'll take it.
Yeah.
Marvel Team Up 53. This came out in 1976 from Marvel Comics. The highest sale of this book is at $800 and 9.6, and that was in December of 2023. The last recorded sale was $10 at a very good. And this fair market value for this book is $2. However, a 9.6 goes for $190. Why is it important? It's the first time John Byrne does the X-Men.
I guarantee you that almost every shop that has this book does not have it noted that that's the case for this.
Major key.
Yeah.
Major. And what's interesting to know is that there are people that know this, because if there's a high sale of $800 for this book, that means you know something.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? However, the raw copies don't seem to perform the same way as the graded copies.
Yeah, this is another example of if you could find a copy for $10 and get it graded, and it's a good copy. And there's good copies of this out there because it's recent enough for that.
Mm-hmm.
And you get a great grade, you're in the monies.
My curiosity is, does CGC take a note of that in the grader's notes? That's something that I would put, like, hey, make sure this is the first artwork of John Byrne on X-Men.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm curious too. It's better for us as collectors if they don't, until mine anyway.
Let's take a look at our next book here, and that is, right now, the biggest book in this list thus far.
Yeah.
Iron Fist 14. This came out in 1977 for Marvel Comics. High sale of this book is at $6,000 at a 9.8. That was in December of 2021. Last recorded sale of this book was $295 at a 7.5. Fair market value of this book is at $326 fine, while a 9.2 is going for $668. This is the first appearance of Sabretooth, just this, minor villain.
Yeah, just minor.
Just minor, slightly minor. What's your thoughts on Sabretooth?
I think he's a great character. I think they've kind of, he's kind of had that run just like Magneto almost, where he's been, really bad, but then gets redeemed somehow, even though the crazy things he does. Mm-hmm. And then he's leading a key team of people, and then he's bad again. I think it's a great character, and I love reading Sabretooth stories.
Yeah, Sabretooth to me is a character that should never be redeemable with the heinous things he does.
I agree.
Especially when he does to Wolverine on his birthday.
Yes.
Every time it's Wolverine's birthday, it's time to kill somebody. I think he's such a great villain in the same way as Joker is, right? You don't want Joker to be the good guy.
Yeah.
You want him to be the bad guy. And the same thing could be said about Sabretooth. I don't like a heroic Sabretooth. I'm sorry, I just don't. Right. Sabretooth I like is a bastard.
Yeah.
John Byrne and Chris Claremont co-created Sabretooth, and he debuts in Iron Fist 14. Let's go with our next book here. And now we're talking about some X-Men, and that's Uncanny X-Men 108. This book came out in 1977 from Marvel. The high sale of this book was $1,375 at a 9.8. That was in April of 2021. The last recorded sale of this book was just $25. Fair market value of this book is at $54 and a very fine, while 9.6 is going for about $355. And as noted, this is the very first John Byrne artwork on an X-Men title.
I love this book. I think that I have from 106 up, like in sequence. So when I looked at this title, I'm like, oh, good. I already have this one. I have to try to find it.
It's kind of a difficult cover to see because it's hard to see, but that's Storm. Like you don't normally see. It's hard to like immediately catch that Storm in the image, but when you see it, after you see it, you're like, oh, okay, I see what's going on here. It is interesting to note, that this was the book that really started it all, right? David Crockham, Len Wein, they started this whole new renaissance for the X-Men. Chris Claremont jumps in, takes over, and then starts working with Dave Crockham. But it wasn't until John Byrne shows up that we ended up getting magic. And the X-Men Even though this book came out in the 70s, the X-Men really became what they were in the 80s. In the 80s is when we got the X-Men. Here was just like the starting of it all, you know what I mean? The beginning stages.
That's where I started picking it up, was during this run, and then just kind of went back and grabbed them again after I got right back into collecting. And I remember reading the Dark Phoenix stories and the all the other ones, and just being like amazed. I loved it.
This is such a cool way of looking at it, right? Let's take a look at our next book here. Here's another book that's in the list that a lot of people are not familiar with, and that's Marvel Team Up 65. So Marvel Team Up was a book that Claremont and John Byrne worked a lot in. This was one of those books. In 1978, this book was made. The high sale of this book was 1,600 at a 9.8, and that was in March of 2022. Last recorded sale was $40 at a 9.0. Fair market value of this book is about $36 fine, while $139 for 9.6. This marks the first U.S. publication of Captain Britain, the first appearance of Captain Britain. But it also features the first cameo appearance of Arcade, a character who, as of right now, we haven't really seen him, in the spotlight. But I honestly believe Arcade is one of those characters that we will see in the MCU. It just makes sense. He's a gamer.
Yeah.
How could you not have touched that yet?
Yeah. They'll have in the boardroom, they're having meetings, and Marvel Rivals comics are selling. What do we got? Well, we got this Arcade guy. Throw him in a movie, quick.
They could do so much cool things with Arcade. Arcade's one of those characters that I personally love because he fits the mode of today's man. Like he would be on YouTube playing video games today. But worst of all, he's doing evil things as a result. So you gotta see him do that. But this one's more important because Captain Britain shows up for the first time in a U.S. comic book.
Yeah.
All right. Next book is Iron Man 118. This came out in 1978 from Marvel Comics. The high sale of this book was at $900 at 9.8, which I think is very underappreciated, to be completely honest. April of 2023. Last recorded sale of this book was $3. Fair market value, $32 at a fine, while $138 at a 9.6. This is the first appearance of James Rhodey Rhodes, who will later become Iron Fist. Quite shocking, to say the least, that this book is so low.
$3? I can't even believe it. For first Rhodes?
First Rhodey, $900 for 9.8? I don't think this is a minor key. He's supposed to get his own series. Would you say Rhodey's a minor key?
I don't think so. I mean, it's tough because, look at what the character has done. He's got armor. He's a military officer. He's been in the movies. I don't know. That ratchets it up a couple of notches, I'd say.
There are plans for Armor Wars, in which Rhodey is the main character. Now, the plan was it to be a TV series, and now there's word that's supposed to become a movie. I don't know if it's gonna ever happen, but if it does, that $900 won't last. That book will then break into four figures. But if you get this book at $32, hold on tight. Because only time will tell. Now, I will admit the MCU have not treated Rhodey's well, but he's been there since day one. Yeah.
I'm trying to think of a comparable, like we talked about Sabretooth, say. I would put Rhodey on the same kind of first appearance key status as Sabretooth.
Mm-hmm.
Personally.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. He's a major character. He even though he is a supporting character to Iron Man, but he is a major character. You know, he has important. He becomes War Machine, becomes an Avenger. He's part of the Shield program. He's a major player in my view. Okay, let's take a look at our next book. Back to Marvel Team Up 79. This book came out in 1978 from Marvel Comics. The high of this book is at $300 at 9.8, and that was in November of 2023. Last recorded sale of this book is $11. Fair market value of this book is $20, while 9.8 is going for $185. This is Spider-Man and Red Sonja. But what's important to note in this story is that Mary Jane gets the spirit of Red Sonja in this book. I remember this book as a kid, and I remember having it. I remember drawing that image of Red Sonja.
I read this title card, and I'm like, Mary Jane Watson as Red Sonja. Is that a typo? I'm like, what? I have to find this book now.
Yep. I like, and we're gonna get to a book later, but these Marvel team up books have a special place in my heart. This is one of those books where it's like, as a kid, when I first started collecting comic books, this was one of the very first comic books I remember having. Where I don't have it anymore, but I'm pretty sure I could pick it up at a very, very inexpensive price. But it's worth noting, Mary Jane's Red Sonja. I'm like, do you think Spider-Man had problems with that?
No.
You know, there is a Spider-Man Red Sonja book that came out much later, in the 2000s, where even Michael Turner did a cover for it. But a lot of people don't realize that this was their first meeting 30 years earlier.
It's cool.
Our next book here, we're going back to the X-Men, and that's Uncanny X-Men 120. This book is at 170. This book came out in 1979 from Marvel Comics. The highest sale of this book is at $10,600 at a 9.8. That was in June of 2021. The last recorded sale of this book was $11, $55 for a fine, $572 for a 9.6 at fair market value. This is the first appearance of the team known as Alpha Flight, and it's the first appearance of Sasquatch, Aurora, Northstar, Shaman, and Snowbird. Come on, you're the Canadian boy here. Tell me how important Alpha Flight is.
I have this book in a 9.2, and yeah, it's like Alpha Flight #1. It's a inexpensive book to pick up. Look at the numbers on this book: $11, and even if you got a 9.6, you know, it's black all the way around, which is, you know, obviously more difficult to get a 9.8. Mm-hmm. But even if you bought 10 of them, that's $100. You send them in, I don't know. And you're supporting Canada.
I just find it so interesting just comparing the two numbers, where you have a high sale of $10,000 and you had a last recorded sale of $11. Granted, I don't know what's the grade on that $11 book. That's why it doesn't have a grade next to it. It was sold as with, you know, no grade, so we don't know the condition of that book. But it is one hell of a comparison.
Yeah. And that 9.8, that was pandemic times too. So it'd be interesting to see a more recent sale for sure. But still, even 9.6, I don't know. The numbers there seem to line up that if you've got a bunch of copies of this,
yeah,
it might be worth grading them.
Well, the comparison between a 9.8 and 9.6 is $500. Yeah. That's nuts.
Yeah.
It's nuts. Okay. Let's take a look at our next book. And here's another one that really shocked me when I saw it, because it didn't hit me until afterwards. And that's Marvel Premiere 47. This book came out in 1979 from Marvel Comics. This has a high sale of $2,428 at 9.8. And that was in October 2021. Last recorded sale of this book was $50. Fair market value of this book was $85, very fine, while $165 at a 9.4. the first appearance of Ant-Man to Scott Lang, as well as the first appearance of Cassie Lang. Now, John Byrne did not do the cover, but he did do the interiors of this book. And this is the first appearance of Ant-Man, the one that is played by Paul Rudd.
Yeah, I grabbed this book during the pandemic, so paid way too much for it. I'm happy I own it. I'm happy that it was on this list because I did not know that it was a John Byrne book at the time that I bought it.
I didn't know that either until I looked it up, and I was like, John Byrne did Ant-Man too? Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And again, going back to Rhodey, I would put like Scott Lang's Ant-Man kind of in that level of kind of key status. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I like the cover too. I think it's a good cover. And, you know, Ant-Man, besides the third movie there, the character itself, though, I've really enjoyed in the MCU.
Well, I would have to put, you know, Scott Lang slightly above Rhodey now, today, only because of the movies, because the movies decided to focus on Scott Lang as opposed to Hank Pym, even though you and I grew up with Hank Pym being Ant-Man and Scott Lang was like, he's the other guy, right?
Yeah.
But the movies decided to make Scott Lang the Ant-Man everybody else knows and loves. So he does fall above War Machine, Rhodey, because he has his own movie. He has a set of movies, in fact, and he's been in multiple projects. But I'm with you. During that time, he was that secondary character. Today, he's more of a major player in the MCU as well as in the comics. But John Byrne had a hand in his creation, which is quite shocking to me. All right, let's take a look at our next book. Fantastic Four 209, 1979 from Marvel Comics. The highest sale of this book was $350 at 9.8. That was in February of 2024, just almost a year ago. Last recorded sale of this book was $50. Fair market value of this book is at $21 at the fine, $84 at a 9.6. This is the first appearance of Herbie the Robot, but is also John Byrne's first artwork on Fantastic Four. Which of the two is bigger?
I don't know, but is Herbie going to be in Marvel Rivals? That's what we need to find out.
Well, we don't know if he probably will eventually land there. He is in the movie. And this book did spike up a couple of months ago in the trending list when we saw posters that he was in the movie. So,
yeah,
it's no longer in the list. But if I picked this book up about a year ago, I picked this book up for like $10. I was like, oh, look what book is here. I'm like, oh, I'll give you $10. And they're like, I'll take it. So I have my copy for $10. And look at it, it's going for 20 now. So pretty good investment there. What do you think about his iconic run in Fantastic Four in comparison to X-Men?
So when I was collecting, I never really got into the Fantastic Four. I was more into X-Men and Titans. So I don't know a lot about his run on Fantastic Four. I really didn't start to pick it up and notice John Byrne stuff until we get to our later stuff we're going to get to in a bit. So this I don't know as much about.
His run on Fantastic Four, what was interesting is, and we'll talk more about this as we get to the X-Men books, is that him and Chris, they were like I said earlier, they were magic together, but they were also like two brothers that were rivals, right? So they have this brotherly love, but at the same time they have this rivalry on each other, and there's times they just couldn't deal with each other. And from what I remember, Fantastic Four was Marvel's way of saying, look, here's a book that you could start writing with, because that's the thing with John. John had a passion for writing too. You know, he wasn't just an artist, he was a writer. And when he did in X-Men, he was able to plot with Chris, but Chris was steering the ship. And there were times they wouldn't agree on things, kind of like Jack and Stan.
Yeah,
pretty much the same thing, right?
Yeah.
So this gave him an opportunity really to spread his wings on a book. Was it as successful as X-Men? Of course it wasn't, especially at that time. However, as we'll see, as we continue to see in these books, that was a monumental series, an iconic series. We're not gonna touch all the books. I just couldn't, like, we talk about Malice. He wrote that story. He drew that story. We're not going to talk about Malice. We're not going to talk about the other Doom books. There's just too much to talk about. But all those stories are coming back, and people are going back to his run. That I am very happy to see.
Yeah.
So there you have it, Fantastic Four 209. Let's go to our next book, and that is Uncanny X-Men 129, 1980. Highest sale of this book is 6,600 at the 9.8, and that was in May of 2021. The last recorded sale of this book was $80. Fair market value of this book is at $150, while 9.6 are going for $420. The key significance of this book, it has a couple of first appearances from Kitty Pryde, Emma Frost. We also have a mention the Hellfire Club is here. And it also starts the Dark Phoenix Saga.
Just an awesome book. I mean, when you start at, say, the start of his run, almost every issue has something important happen in it.
Oh, yeah. Like this run, this Dark Phoenix run, we're not going to touch all the books, but practically every single book in that run has a key significance to it.
Yeah.
That's how important the Dark Phoenix Saga was. That every single issue was important. Here's another thing that I have to share with you. I have a copy of this book. I did not know what this book was when I saw it, and the copy I have is a banged up copy. It's even missing a page here. It's missing a cover. There's a page. I don't even remember where I got it, but when I saw it, I was like, after I figured out what it was, I was like, what am I doing? I have this book in my collection. Where this book came from? So I'm happy to say I do have this book in my collection, but it's like I said, it's a banged up copy. So, but I'm happy to say I have one.
Yeah. Mine's definitely not a 9.8 or 9.8 candidate.
Yeah,
but
mine is probably not even a 5. Okay. All right, let's go to our next book, and that is
like
my
I said,
heart hurts.
The next issue.
The very next issue, 1980, Uncanny X-Men 130. The high sale of this book was at 2,109.8. That was in October of 2023. Last recorded sale of this book was $74. Fair market value of this book is $72 at very fine, while $310 for 9.6. This is the first appearance, as you can't tell by the cover, of Dazzler. It's also the first appearance of Sebastian Shaw, but no one's talking about him. Let's talk about Dazzler.
Yeah, I love the trade dress. I wonder if that's, was his decision or somebody else's or Chris's or whoever.
Neither. This cover is done by John Romita Jr.
Yeah, but I wonder if he decided, like, if Romita decided to put the lights around the X-Men or not, and just doing that. And I can't think of a book that during that Deadpool lead up was more hyped up or a character than Dazzler. It was just everybody was running around in a fever.
You're telling me? We talked a lot about this during last year when we were talking about books with a lot of hype. Do they have their very risk-taking books? And unfortunately, this one didn't live up to the hype. Even when everybody was like, oh, yeah, let's be honest, Taylor Swift. Everybody wanted Taylor Swift to be Dazzler. I think the day will happen. My personal opinion is I think the day will happen. So, but not now. This is not the time. It was one of those books, man, that just... It was always on the top 10 list. It was always hot. Everybody was waiting. When Deadpool Wolverine came out, we were there waiting with anticipation. Even when they were telling us, she's not in the movie. She's not in the movie. She's not in the movie. We like, no, you lie. You guys lie all the time, right? Which is true. They do lie all the time.
They'd say she's not in the movie, and then they release a picture of the director and her walking around.
Yeah, and the Super Bowl and all that stuff, right? Yeah. So they're doing all that stuff. And, we find out They were telling the truth. She's not in the movie. And they don't even mention her in the movie. It's not even a mention of Taylor Swift. There's not a mention of Dazzler. None of that's happening here. So it's what we call an epic fail.
Still a classic book with the classic cover that is an important part of the run and a key issue for sure. So despite all the movie shenanigans, I think the FOMO hurt Dazzler 1 more than it hurt this book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it still demands some good money. I'll admit to that. Yeah. But you're talking about a book that's now well past its hype, unfortunately. Hopefully, we'll get Dazzler sooner or later. I'm sure of it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Let's take a look at our next book. Whew. Now, remember when I said every single book in that run was important, but I just couldn't do them all. I had to do this one, which is Uncanny X-Men 133. This book came out in 1980 from Marvel Comics. The highest sale of this book was $2,309.8, and that was September 2023. Last recorded sale was $45. Fair market value of this book is $87. $325 for 9.6. This is part 5 of the Phoenix Saga. However, this is the first time we get Wolverine solo on the cover with all the minions from the Hellfire Club. It's also the first time that we confirm Wolverine's healing factor. This is the book that really solidified Wolverine.
I love this book, and this is another one that when I picked it up, didn't know anything about any of that. It was just another number in the run that I needed to pick up, and I'm glad I did it all those years ago.
Yeah. It's a book when at first glance you don't really know, but then when you find out what this book is very important because, like I said, Wolverine is the most popular X-Men. I'm sorry if you feel differently. He is. The numbers prove it. And this is the first time he gets the limelight. And then we find out how badass Wolverine really is in this book. Let's talk about our next book in this list. We talked last week about Neil Adams. And this week, we're talking about the other book, and that's Uncanny X-Men 135. This book came out in 1980 from Marvel Comics. Highest sale of this book is at $780 and 9.8. That was in August of 2021. Last recorded sale of this book is $48. Fair market value of this book is $52 at very fine, $220 at a 9.6. This is part 7 of the Dark Phoenix Saga. This is the first appearance of Senator Robert Kelly, which is also important to note. Minor key in that way, but it's a major key because this is paying homage to Neil Adams from that book we talked about last week. But this time, John Byrne is homaging him with the Phoenix, and he does this. He likes doing homages. We'll see another homage later.
I love this cover. Mm-hmm. I love it. Mm-hmm. I love the crushing of the trade dress. Mm-hmm. It's just total classic cover. Awesome work for sure.
It is a great book. Just seeing it. Look at her eyes, man. You could tell something's not right.
Yeah. He got that across excellently for sure.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Great cover. Great book. Let's go to our next book. And this is the final part of the Dark Phoenix Saga with Uncanny X-Men 137, 1980 from Marvel Comics. The highest sale of this book was $7,945. That was in a 9.9, and that happened in March of 2022. The last recorded sale of this book was $88. Fair market value of this book is $40 and $144 for a 9.6. This is an iconic art cover. Cover art by John Byrne, but it also features the death of Jean Grey. So we think.
Right. Nothing stays still in comics.
No, we'll get to that later. All right. Tell me what's your thoughts of this story, especially here.
I liked, obviously, the Dark Phoenix Saga. This cover, like, it doesn't stand out as much to me as other ones, but I just I love that whole run, this whole storyline, and it's one of the ones that actually I have to go back and reread again, like all together at once, because I kind of read it as I picked up different parts. But I do remember really enjoying this issue for sure.
Yeah, I have some memories of this book as well. So back then, when I was collecting comics as a kid, we would trade comics. This was one of those books I would constantly be trading in and out in my collection. So I had a friend and say, "Oh," and he made the book so important. I really didn't know how important it was at that time. I was too young to really know that. And he would like, "Oh, I'll give you this book for 5 of your other books."
Yeah.
Because he understood the importance of the book where I didn't. So I said, "Okay, which 5 do you want?" And he's picking up books that are like probably even more important at that time. And I remember it. And I always remember how important this book was at that. This is the first book in my collection that I ever looked at as a major key. At growing up as a collector as a kid, this was that first key in my. Even though I had other books that were bigger keys before that, but this is the first one that I identify as being a key and having significant impact.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's also a pretty damn good cover, man. Says a lot. Okay, let's go to our next book here. And here's something that stood out that I didn't see coming. And that's the Untold Legend of Batman #1. This book came out in 1980 for DC Comics. The highest sale of this book is at $300 at 9.2, and that was December 2021. Last recorded sale of this book was $88. Fair market value of this book is $3, while a 9.6 are fetching for $26. This is the first DC comic done by John Byrne.
It would be very interesting to see, like you said in one of the last ones, does it note that on the CGC slab for $26 for a 9.6?
Notice the difference. The $26 for a 9.6, but it sold for $300 at a 9.2.
Yeah.
But again, that was in the hype.
Yep.
But still, John Byrne's first DC published work. And it took a long time because you could tell by this list, he was a big Marvel guy.
Yeah.
So before the 80s, he didn't touch DC. He was strictly Marvel. And his first book just happens to be really a throwaway book. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Who would have guessed it, Especially, this is coming off of the Dark Phoenix Saga. So that means he's an established artist.
Yeah, and people know his name from that.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe some people at the time bought this book because of that, but then that didn't last very long, I don't think, because I don't ever remember seeing this book even.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't remember seeing it. Okay, let's go to our next book here. Going back to Marvel. So they did Dark Phoenix Saga, right? They had a couple of books here and there afterwards. Some important books, But then we get Uncanny X-Men 141. Came out in 1981 from Marvel Comics. The high sale of this book is $1,950 at 9.8. That was in April of 2021. Last recorded sale of this book was $118. Fair market value of this book is $115 at a very fine and $324 at a 9.6. This is part 1 of the 2-part story, Days of Future Past. This features the first team appearance of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, which also happens to be the first appearance of Mystique, Destiny, Pyro, Avalanche, and the Blob, and nothing could stop him. First appearance of the second Phoenix, Rachel Summers, which happens to be the daughter of Scott and Jean from this alternate reality.
If you can keep track of all that, I loved Rachel. I loved that character. I still do. I remember reading these books when they came out and just being like, what is her story? Like, what like what's going on? Because, you know, time travel in comics at this point, like it wasn't as common as it is now. Like it just was, I just thought it was so cool. And I really liked that Rachel character.
It's kind of a shame that people don't give her as much love as she probably should deserve. Especially with her history, like all the stuff that she was a part of.
Yeah.
However, let's talk about this story for a minute. This story was adapted into a movie, and it's probably one of the best movies in the X-Men series that we have there. And this always has an effect on in the X-Men universe. So the X-Men universe, even up to now, they're fearful of this occasion happening.
Yep.
So it had that effect. This is one of those stories that had that effect.
Yeah, and I agree with you about the movie. Like I love the scenes where they're fighting off the Sentinels, like where they cut back to that. I just think that's great. And I don't know, since we're talking about it, have you ever watched the Rogue cut of that movie?
I did, but I don't remember much of it. I have it. I actually have a copy of it.
Yeah, it's really good too, and it gives you kind of a little bit different perspective. But you're right, like all the mutant stories are all about them not having a horrific future because of this book.
Mm-hmm. This is the book that kind of like we talk about Dark Phoenix being probably the greatest story. This comes in as a very, very close second, but I think this has more impact than Dark Phoenix.
Yeah, I agree.
Mm-hmm. Right. Let's talk about the other issue, which is X-Men 142. This came out the very following month, so it's 1981. High sale of this book is $1,239 and 9.8. That came out in April 2021. That was when it was sold. Last recorded sale of this book was $55. Fair market value of this book is $32 at a fine and $414 and 9.8. It's part 2, but it also features the death of Wolverine, Colossus, and Storm in this reality. So the issue wasn't lying to you. Yeah. Everyone dies.
Yeah. Yeah. Just the storytelling in this time, just so great because again, it wasn't as common for, you know, that everybody just expected the characters came back to life and you didn't know about all the alternate realities and time and all that stuff. So it's really cool. I loved it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And just looking at that cover, we talked about something similar to this last week, where it's like looking at a newsstand and going to your local newsstand to get your comic books, and you see that cover. It's 1981. You go to 7-Eleven, and there it is, just waiting for you. Man.
Yep. And you've got your limited amount of money. You've got to pick. You've got to decide. It's not like now for a lot of us who are very fortunate that can kind of decide on our own which ones we're getting. But back then it was like a decision that had to be made. Am I getting this one or am I getting this one? And that's why those older covers are so great, because they wanted your money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they work hard for it. And this was a good example of that. Great cover. One of my favorites. Let's take a look at our next book. I always like throwing in deep cuts. And here's your deep cut. The Further Adventures of Indiana Jones #1. This came out in 1982 from Marvel Comics. High sale of this book was at $300 and 9.8. Apparently, someone did grade this book. In March of 2022. Last recorded sale of this book is $5. Fair market value of this book is $5, while 9.8 is going for $106. Of course, it's Indiana Jones, done by John Byrne. It's not the first Indiana Jones book we talked about before on this show either, too.
I have issue 2 of this.
Oh, really?
Not this one, yeah.
It's just so cool seeing that at this time they were doing these kinds of books, even though these books were like, again, I mentioned throwaway books. These are books that no one really bought. They were just, you know, companies saying, hey, can you do a book for us to promote the movie? Yeah. And that's what they were.
And Marvel wasn't, you know, what they are today. So anytime anybody asked them to do something, I think they just said yes.
Yeah, they made money off of it. So
yeah.
Fun book. Yeah, our next book is The Thing #1. This came out in 1983 from Marvel Comics. High sale of this book is at $300 and 9.8, and that was in January of 2022, so 2 years ago. Last recorded sale of this book was $55 and 9.2. Fair market value of this book is $17 and very fine, $189 and 9.8. The key significance of this book is the First Thing solo headlining series. It is not the First Thing solo series, but it's his first title with his name on the trade dress. And it was John Byrne that did the work.
Yeah, this is one that I've never read, and I don't even know if I've seen this one before. Mm-hmm. You know, like I said, I wasn't huge into the Fantastic Four until really Secret Wars, and then that kind of introduced me to them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this is one of those books that, again, you could find at a very inexpensive price. You find out that it's his Thing's first book, really, where he doesn't have to say Marvel 2-in-1 or anything like that. It's the First Thing comic book. It took that long for him to get his own comic book. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, it's crazy.
Mm-hmm. 20 years it took him to get his own solo book.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. They didn't have that much confidence in him, unfortunately.
No, I don't think so.
All right, let's go to our next book, and that is one that I think should be dear to your heart, and that's Alpha Flight #1, 1983 from Marvel Comics. High sale value of this book is $575 and 9.8. That was September 2021. Last recorded sale of this book was $10. Fair market value of this book is $13 and near mint, $48 and 9.6. This features the first appearance of the other members of Alpha Flight, which includes Thundra, Puck, Marina, Wildheart, Diamond Little, and Wild Child. Talk to me about Alpha Flight.
Well, I remember reading Alpha Flight really because of the X-Men books, because they were in there, which we talked about earlier. And I can honestly say, I don't think I own this one because I just kind of missed the boat on it. I have a bunch of different issues of Alpha Flight, but not #1. And it's just something that they do have cool characters in them. I like the design of some of the costumes. And it's just always interesting how they got to get in there, you know, that they're from Canada. I think that's cool.
Yeah, that's always that has to be the big point of talking about it, right? Well, John Byrne is from Canada, so he wanted to have a Canadian book. So there you have it. Yeah. But Alpha Flight, as the years, people are starting to get more and more love for Alpha Flight, even though they will always consider like a second level team. But there's this love for Alpha Flight that I think wasn't there before. You know what I'm saying? And it's kind of cool that they're starting to become more and more like Canada's Avengers, more than, you know, second fiddle to the X-Men.
Yeah, for sure. And I always look at it like when I'm trying to figure out, you know, what characters they might use next in Marvel or wherever, you know, like what about characters here? Like, are they easy to do on screen? Do they take a lot of effects? You know, and there's some characters that they could pull from here that easily transfer to, you know, TV or movies for sure.
I think the hardest one will probably be Puck, because Puck is a fan favorite.
Yeah.
And you got to get him right without making it insulting, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
You know? Okay, let's go to our next book in our list. And that is Fantastic Four 265. This came out in 1984 from Marvel Comics. High sale of this book was $175 and 9.8. That was in May of 2023. Last recorded sale of this book was $6. Fair market value of this book is $5. $125 and 9.8. Excuse me. This is when She-Hulk joined the Fantastic Four. And it's important to note, John Byrne and She-Hulk are going to be doing big things together very soon.
Definitely. And was this just after? I'm trying to remember if this was just before or just after Secret Wars. I think this is a little bit before.
This is actually, she joins the team in Secret Wars.
Yeah.
This is the book that she becomes part of the team.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Now, this was important because the Thing is now out of the team. I forgot what was the reason why the thing was out. I don't remember what was. I'm sure people will know in the chat. But she joins the team. It becomes a big deal. You know, we got another female character in the Fantastic Four. So now we got two female characters, two female leads. But it's John Byrne writing She-Hulk, and he ends up falling in love with this character. He really does. As he starts writing her, she's a little different here than when much later when he starts writing her more properly in the way we know. This is something where John Byrne, he started writing this character and he started doing things with this character he probably wouldn't have been able to do with the Thing.
Exactly, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, and there is a famous cover. It comes of several issues later where she's standing in Stan Lee. I actually thought that was the first book that she joined the team, but it turned out it was this one. That was about 10 issues later, so it was 275. Here's another one, Peter Parker, The Spectacular Spider-Man 101. This came out in 1985 in Marvel Comics. Highest sale of this book was $750 at 9.8. Last recorded sale of this book was $32. Fair market value of this book is $31 and very fine, $152 and 9.6. All this book is an iconic black costume Spider-Man cover done by John Byrne. You wouldn't know it because it's playing with negative space, and does it do a great job.
Oh, amazing. When you see this cover, if it's out anywhere, it completely stands out. It is such a well-designed and well-done cover.
Mm-hmm. So good. And you know, it is a John Byrne, but you wouldn't know it. It's one of those books that it's like, because it's a negative space and he's toying with negative space here, that you just don't know. But it's an early black costumes, cover.
Yeah.
And it's also iconic. Like this is $750 just because of a cover. Yeah. That's why it's sold, because of a cover. There's nothing inside the book that has value. It's just a cover by. Mm-hmm. Okay. Our next book is Fantastic Four 286. This is done in 1984 from Marvel Comics. High sale of this book was $180 at a 9.8, and that was in May of 2021. Last recorded sale of this book was $2. Fair market value of this book is $3 and fine, $89 at a 9.8. This marks the return of Jean Grey, and it's the setup to X Factor, which is the original X-Men team. Why is this book here? Because there was a mandate of bringing her back, and John Byrne was bringing her back. Something that Chris did not want.
Yeah, and I had no idea that happened in this book. So, as I usually say, on Wednesday, I will be looking for this book.
Yeah, this is one of those books that people seek, because there's more to the story than that's what's in the story. This is one of those books, and that's why it's here, that the behind the scenes is more interesting than the actual story, where Chris Claremont didn't want to bring her back. That's why they did the whole Madeline Price story. But then Marvel wanted to bring her back because they were going to do X Factor. And so John Byrne ended up with task of bringing her back, and she came back in this book, which was really odd at the time. But John Byrne is notorious with the Dark Phoenix Saga because he did the art. So that's where it makes sense. Mm-hmm. Very controversial return too. Like I don't think people liked it too much.
Yeah, and I wonder if Claremont got any money from this type of book where he didn't have any say, but it's one of the characters he co-created. I wonder what his arrangement at the time was with Marvel.
I can tell you a little bit about that. He didn't make anything out of it because he had a hand in turning her into Dark Phoenix. However, if you notice, it's Jean Grey that's returning.
And she's like a phoenix.
She's like a phoenix, but she's not the Phoenix. So
I can see him being mad about that.
He didn't care. He didn't want to bring her back anyway.
Yeah.
But it just one of those stories where, yeah, we're bringing her back. Why? because we want her back.
Yeah.
That's
Because
it.
of cash.
Yeah. Right. Here's another one that's important. Marvel graphic novel number 18, The Sensational She-Hulk. This came out in 1985 from Marvel Comics. High sale of this book is at $350 at a 9.8, and that was November 2021. Last recorded sale of this book was $25. Fair market value of this book is $24 and near mint, $200 and 9.6. This is John Byrne's first solo She-Hulk story.
I've never seen this book before, so that's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
All black around too. Man, that's a tough 9.8 to get.
It's also a larger book because it's considered one of the graphic novels. Even though this is his first solo book with She-Hulk, she's not the She-Hulk we know. She's not there yet.
Yeah.
But he is toying around with it. So, but this was the first book, and again, look at the title. It says The Sensational She-Hulk. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
It's a graphic novel, so it went directly to the comic book shops. It didn't go to the newsstands. So at 85, if you had a comic book shop, then you saw it. If you didn't have one, you didn't see it. That's how that works with this book. But like I said, he started getting this affinity for She-Hulk. It became one of his, his characters. Superman, the Man of Steel, number 1, 1986 for DC Comics. The high sale of this book is at $198 at 9.8. Last recorded sale of this book is $3. Fair market value of this book is $4, $105 for 9.8. This is the first appearance and origin of post-crisis Superman. It's also the first appearance of Kalex, the artificial intelligence of the Fortress of Solitude. Now, I have a question for you, Shane, to see if you know the answer.
Okay.
Why is this book so inexpensive?
Well, I would say because there's another one of this one. But I've never understood why this series is not more prominent, to be honest, because this is what got me into Superman. When this came out, the hype was back then before internet. Everybody was talking about this book, it seemed.
Just the fact that you said that, it answers the question. So this does have a high print run to it. The book sold, and it sold a lot. This book was significant because this is the book that came out of Crisis on Infinite Earths. And John Byrne was tasked to retell the story of Superman, but change it up, depower him, because he was getting depowered, and give us a fresh take on Superman. Remember I mentioned this earlier? John Byrne did Ultimate Universe, Absolute Universe before everybody else did. The difference was he was allowed to do it within the universe.
Yeah.
And this was his take on a completely new, a completely different Superman that we knew beforehand. It was still Superman, but like I said, he was depowered. We have a different type of story. He is the last son of Krypton. So there is no Supergirl. There's no Krypto. There's none of that stuff going on here. Also, he also reinvented Lex Luthor to be more of a billionaire tycoon who kind of looks like some guy who was inaugurated not that long ago.
Yeah. These covers are just classic too for the series. You talk about the absolute and the ultimate thing. I mean, look, it's just like an ultimate cover, except for it's reversed.
Yeah.
And, very similar styling there, but I love the consistency in the covers from 1 to 6. I just think they're really good.
Yep. And it's worth noting, there was a special collector's edition, and this was a cover done by Byrne as well. This is considered by many to be the first intentional variant cover to be sold only in comic book stores. This one came out at the same time, of course, and it has a high sale of $250 at 9.8, recorded sale of $8, fair market value is $2, very fine, $125 at 9.8. just like the other one, there's a high print count as well. But this is by many to be the very first variant. This started it all.
Yeah, and I have this cover. I don't think I have the other issue one, but I have this one because again, it's back in the day where you had to pick one. But I love this cover too. The trade dress was like almost like a foil effect on it, which was really cool and a little bit strange for DC to do. But yeah, I love this series, and I thought it was a great Superman story myself.
Oh, it is a fantastic series. Like, I think John Byrne, he did everything right when he wrote it, where he says, okay, we like this, we don't need this, we don't need that. He just took the fluff off, as they say. You know what I mean? Yeah. But good stuff.
That's a great way to put it, for sure.
And it was also kind of like, what is it about the movie that we like that we want to keep? And what is it about other things that we might want to see differently? Like, I think the biggest change really was, I think, Lex Luthor. But Luthor was changed in a way that made sense.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree with that he respected history. That I think is what some of the newer writers, why things aren't going as well as they could, because Byrne here just took Superman and didn't inject any of his own stuff really into it, but just made the story different and better, in my opinion. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was really good.
Let's take a look at our next book in our list. Okay, I'll explain this one in a minute. Marvel Tales 206. This book came out in 1987 from Marvel Comics. The high sale of this book is at $48 and 9.6, and that was September 20th. Last recorded sale of this book is $6. Fair market value of this book is $5 at a fine, $48.96. This is a reprint of Marvel Team Up issue number 70. It is a story by Chris Claremont and John Byrne. Features the Living Monolith. It also features Havoc in it, and it also has an all-new Spider-Ham backstory. All right, Shane, I'm gonna ask you a question, and you're gonna be very honest with me here. Why is this book in this list?
Because you love Spider-Ham.
Yes, I do love Spider-Ham, but it's not because of Spider-Ham.
Okay.
You want to take another stab at it?
No, I have no idea then, unless it's the monolith.
Yeah, right. This is my very first comic book.
Oh, there you go. That's great.
So the very first comic book I ever picked up was this book. And this is the one that started the collection for me.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Do you have it, comic still?
Oh, I still have it. It looks like garbage right now because
that's the best.
It is at most of 1.8. But I did manage to pick up the Team Up book. So I picked up the Team Up book. I showed it to Chris Claremont. He looked at me with his face like, okay. But it does have a special place in my heart. I figured I have to put this in this list.
Yeah, for sure.
Just to let you know, this is the book that started. It's a fun story. And it's like one of those stories, like, what the hell's going on with this story? You got the Living Monolith, you got Havoc, you got Thor. I don't know what they were thinking when they did this story.
Yeah.
It's just one of those crazy stories. It's a fun story. It's just pure comic books. And what a great cover. So this is a reprint of Team Up 70. And if you see Team Up 70, it's the same cover. They just changed the trade dress a little bit here and there. And
the Spider-Ham story is not in Team Up 70 then?
No. So the Spider-Ham story is a new story. It's a fun story too. It's so funny. Enough of reminiscing nostalgia. Let's go to our next book. Here's a very important book because a lot of people don't know about the importance of this book. Marvel Comics Presents 18. This book came out in 1988 from Marvel Comics. High sale value of this book is $189 and 9.8. That was in July of 2023. Last recorded sale of this book was $5. The fair market value of this book is $6 and $132 and 9.6. this is the introduction of She-Hulk speaking to the reader, or what we call breaking the fourth wall.
This is another one I'm putting it on my list to look for on Wednesday because I guarantee that it's not noted on the slab or on anything.
It might be noted on the slab, but most people don't know about it.
Yeah. And it's not an easy book to find like physically at a comic shop, because is it under She-Hulk? Is it under M? Is it under Marvel Presents? Like,
yeah, it's under Marvel Comics Presents. I'm almost certain of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It is interesting because Marvel Comics Presents, most people recognize it with Wolverine, especially with the Weapon X story.
Yeah.
Right. So Marvel Comics Presents did have stories that feature other characters. However, none of them had that same impact as the Wolverine stories. It ended up being a secondary comic for Wolverine, even though it had 4 other comic stories in it. The other thing that's worth noting about Marvel Comics Present that some people don't know is that it was ad-free. It didn't have ads.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so that was something that's I always notice about Marvel Comics Presents. It was just no ads on the book. So, good book to have. Another good book to have is Sensational She-Hulk #1. This came out in 1989 from Marvel Comics. The high sale of this book is $408, 9.8. That was in October of 2021. Last recorded sale, $1. Fair market value.
I can get it for a loony.
Fair market value of this book is at $12 near mint. 9.8 goes for $108. This is the introduction of She-Hulk speaking to the reader or breaking the fourth wall. So Marvel Comics Present is the first book that does it. But what Marvel Comics Presents does that's so fun is that it's doing it to promote this book.
That's awesome.
And I remember picking this book up. This is one of my early books too. I remember picking this up. Now, this book had a higher price tag than the other books. So this was considered one of the more of the premier books. So in 89, Marvel and DC for that matter, they were deciding to do new books and they called them the prestige books.
Yeah.
Where the quality of paper were better. As I mentioned, some of them didn't have ads or things like that. And even some of them were like for mature audiences in some cases. This was just a comic book that was, I don't know if it had ads or not. I can't remember about the ads part, but it was definitely it was better quality paper than the traditional newsprint style paper. Yeah. I remember seeing this and seeing this cover and was blown away at the amount of detail that this issue has. This is one of those covers, and I'm not saying anything bad about John Byrne prior, but he took more time doing this than previous books because he absolutely believed in this story.
Yeah, you're 100% right. Like, again, it's the combination of the pink background, the detail in the character, that there's text on the cover, which, was more common back then, but still not very common. And I love this cover. It just stands out. I have 2 of these books. So
yeah, I have 2. I have the original one that I have, and I ended up getting another copy about 2 years ago. It's amazing how low this book has gotten. Like, again, last sale was $1, but yeah, it was at its height, it was $400, and now it's about $100.
That's the reverse TV effect.
People were not big fans of the TV show. I kind of enjoyed it. I understood why people didn't like it, but I did enjoy it because I knew what I was getting in it.
Yeah, I think that if you were a fan of this run of She-Hulk, this is kind of where the show was trying to get to, I think, from watching it. Because I'm like you, I did watch it, and I enjoyed parts of it. There was parts that I was like I would question, but again, it's supposed to kind of have that. I think it was supposed to be a little zany and crazy, which is kind of what this book was.
Yeah, and I don't know how many people knew that going in. Like they promoted it as if it was kind of like a comedy series, right?
Yeah.
And we got some really fun moments and stuff. Like the Daredevil episode was fun. The Wong episode was fun. I wasn't big of a fan of what they did to Abomination. I think that was kind of an abomination. But at the same time, it had the elements of what this comic book was doing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm not a fan I'm really not that much of a fan of the Dan Slott run, because I feel like John Byrne's run is so much better.
Yeah, I enjoyed this era for sure.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Our next book, I mentioned this before about homages. He loves doing homages. West Coast Avengers 45. This came out in 1989. Marvel Comics. The high sale of this book was $1,500 at 9.8. That was in February 2021. The boom.
Yeah.
Last recorded sale was $200 at a 9.8. What a difference.
Yeah.
Fair market value of this book is $17 near mint, $129 at 9.6. This is the first appearance of the White Vision, and it's also an homage to Avengers 57. Before you even start saying anything, let's talk about this high sale versus this recorded sale. What happened to this book?
Well, I think it was a combination of the TV show hit, the pandemic was there, then, nothing came from it. They didn't act fast enough on WandaVision. And I really believe that this is not where this book is going to be. This will spike again, because whatever they do with the Vision when he comes back will cause all those same people to come back to this book. So I own 2 copies of this, and I'm fine with owning them.
Yeah. But just looking at that comparison, though, a drop of $1,300. This book was 4 figures, and now it's $200.
Yeah,
that's insane to me to see that kind of drop in 4 years spans. With 4 years to do a combo, this is the epitome of spec book.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. And that's when all the specking was at its height, right? Like people saw that character on TV, and Marvel was, had nothing faltering them at that point. And they were like, well, this is going to be a sure thing. This is the next character. He's going to be in all this stuff. And then nothing happened. So,
yeah. And that was a shame at that time, where we were getting all this stuff. There was no payback. There was no payoffs for anything. We have these end credits where characters showing up. To this day, we don't even know what's the story with those characters. That was a shame. Wow. This was the biggest shock of them all.
Yeah, that's a crazy drop.
Another book here is an iconic book. It's Wolverine 18. This came out in 1989 from Marvel Comics. Highest sale of this book is $384 at 9.8. That was in March of 2022. Last recorded sale of this book was $16. Fair market value of this book is $18, and 9.8s go for $158. All this is an iconic Wolverine cover by John Byrne. Similar to the Vision book, this book had a dramatic decrease in sale. Dramatic. Yeah.
If you're a Wolverine fan, either you already have this book in your collection or you want to have it in your collection. It's just an awesome cover for sure.
And that's all it is, right? There's nothing else about it has importance. So we talked about keys. This is a cover by. This is a cover book. It looks great though. The background, the orangey red background to the brown costume, which is my favorite costume of Wolverine. I love this costume more than any other costume.
Yeah.
It's just so good. All right, let's take a look at our next book. Uncanny X-Men 282. This came out in 1991 from Marvel Comics. High sale of this book is $515 at 9.8, and that was in April of 2021. Last recorded sale of this book was $45 at a 9.0, and the fair market value of this book is $15, while 9.8s are going for about $87. This is the first cover and cameo appearance of Bishop. It is worth noting that John Byrne has credit for writing this story and not doing the art. The art is done by Wals Potasio.
$87 for 9/8 of a character. Again, like we'll go along the same lines of Rhodey there, but I think Bishop's a fairly important X-Men. So if you're hunting, first appearances that you can afford and a 9/8 at that for less than $100, why not?
And Bishop's one of those characters. He's the rare situation where he is a black character in the X-Men, and X-Men don't really have a lot of black characters. They were known as an international set of characters, right? So they had characters from different countries. Storm being the quintessential black character for that team, right? Because at the 70s and 80s, that's kind of how they did things, right?
Yeah.
When you had like in the cartoons, in the comic books, they will always have, okay, we need to have at least one black character. We need to have one woman. We need to have, there's a powerhouse character. So there was a formula that they had to follow back then. Bishop shows up. He's a black character from the future. He's bringing along some information about a traitor who we find out who ends up becoming, spoiler, ends up becoming Xavier, where everybody thought it was Gambit. And this is, he makes his first appearance here, but in a cameo. But they made a bigger deal because of the cover. He makes the cover appearance, which it's like Red Hulk all over again, right? Yeah. Where issue 1 is the cover, he makes a cameo in the first issue. But in this one, he makes a cameo, I think, like in the last page. But it was a black character in the X-Men that, let's be honest, there really aren't that many.
Yeah. And an important character too. Like he's still around, still has a role in a lot of the books. So
yeah. Here's another book that came out in 1995 for DC Comics, is Wonder Woman 101. High sale of this book is $110 at 9.8. That was in November of 2019. Last recorded sale of this book was $50 at 9.8. Fair market value of this book is $3. Fair market value is $50 or 9.8. This is John Byrne's iconic run on Wonder Woman. It didn't have the same impact as Superman did, right? But it's important to note that when he was doing this, people were picking up the book. And boy, does Wonder Woman have a lot of hair.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I actually had this book in my hand this weekend.
Really?
Because, my friend was there and she's kind of looking for different Wonder Woman books. And we definitely saw a bunch of the Byrne run, because I remember saying, I can tell already that's John Byrne art. But I didn't know until I saw this that was his first one. Mm-hmm. So that's interesting.
Yeah. What's your thoughts on John Byrne's Wonder Woman run?
I liked it. I mean, I'll always prefer the Perez run myself personally, just because, like you, that was kind of my, that's where I started to get into it. I saw his work on, the Titans, and that drew me into Wonder Woman because he was redoing it. And so I kind of have a early memory of reading that book and just learning so much from it.
Yeah. Yeah. And at this point, he wasn't relaunching Wonder Woman because it's 101, but it was like a soft reboot of the character. That's what it was. It wasn't Perez. He did a relaunch of it because it was part of post-crisis. This was more like, okay, sales are slacking. Let's put a major writer artist in this book, and that's where we get Wonder Woman. He does give us the first appearance of Cassie, who will eventually become Wonder Girl. We're not going to talk about that here in next couple of books, but I would say it wasn't as an impact as the Superman, but it was a good time period. It was 95, so comics was at a point that they were struggling and they were trying to come up with all sorts of gimmicks at that time.
Yep.
This was him trying his best to give a solid Wonder Woman story. And you know what? They were solid. They weren't, changing events, but it was solid storytelling.
Yep, I agree.
Okay, let's go to our next book. Superman, the Wedding Album. This book came out in 1996 for DC Comics. Last recorded highest sale of this book is $150 and 9.8. That was in January 2024. Last recorded sales value of this book was $5. Fair market value of this book is $5 near mint, $148 at a 9.8. This is the marriage of Superman and Lois Lane. Interior art depict a number of past Superman creators attending the wedding, which was officiated by Jerry Siegel.
I never got this book. I don't know why I missed it. That's right around the time when I was kind of leaving school and trying to find work. So that might have been budgetary reasons. But yeah, no, I never picked up this book. So I've never actually looked at it.
Do you think it was the right move getting them married?
Yes, I think so. I think it's like, you know, you can have the same, we talk about it a lot with Spider-Man stuff and Mary Jane, but I think you can have everything that you want because you have Superboy, you have younger characters that can be struggling with that stuff for more of a kid angle readers. And you can have more kind of grown-up stuff that they deal with when they're in a relationship and still having to be a superhero. So I don't think it takes anything away from the character. I think it just adds to it.
Well, it is funny because when we talk about Spider-Man, you know, some people debate who's Spider-Man's love. Is it Mary Jane? Is it Gwen Stacy? I think for the most part, most people pick Mary Jane, of course. Superman doesn't have that. There is no love triangle with Superman. It's like Lois Lane is his girl. Yeah. That is that. Right? But I think what makes the Superman Lois Lane dynamic interesting is it is a love triangle. But the difference here, it's a love triangle between Clark, Superman, and Lois Lane, even though Clark and Superman are the same person.
Yeah.
So there's that struggle there, which made it for interesting storytelling. The fact that she eventually finds out who he is, I think is the right move. And then eventually we do get the wedding. And now as of today, I think people have accepted it more. I think Superman and Lois is more acceptable than Mary Jane and Spider-Man because they kind of don't mind Superman getting older.
Right. Yeah, that's strange that that's kind of that way. But yeah, I do agree with that, though, for sure. And especially in the early stages of their kind of relationship, it was definitely that triangle you're talking about, which did make for good stories.
It made for fun stories, too. Like, everybody else is seeing it, but you guys aren't.
Yeah.
Right. There is a white cover as well for this book. I didn't put it in there because I think we want to focus more on John Byrne than the actual book. But there is a white cover. It goes for about the same value as well. The book in itself, high print run, because it was the 90s. They printed, there's tons of books out there. So it's very affordable to get. But it's a cool book to have. A lot of creators. John Byrne gets tasked with the cover, which is kudos for him. Let's go to our next book. Here's one that I forgot existed. Batman and Captain America. This came out in 1996 for DC and Marvel. High sale of this book is at $60, and that was in March of 2023. Last recorded sale of this book was $15. Fair market value of this book is $20. There are no slabs recorded in sales. And of course, this is a DC Marvel crossover event featuring Batman and Captain America, done by John Byrne.
Another one I'm going to have to look for. I did not know about this book.
Yeah, I forgot about this book. Like, honestly, completely forgot about this book. I may have this book. I don't even know. So this is still a possibility for me. But I like that John Byrne tackled two characters that he's normally not known for doing. He had a run on Avengers, but what he did, he had a run on West Coast Avengers. And then he worked on Superman. So they said, you want to do Batman, Captain America, two characters that you normally don't do? He's like, let's go for it.
Yeah. I wonder if this book is included in the recent kind of crossover omnibus that they did that includes all the amalgam stuff.
It's quite possibly it is. But it is a thick book, so I think it's like a 64-pager, and it is considered an Elseworld story. So that's another thing to worth note, that it has that Elseworld story logo in the bottom. Okay, let's go to our next book, and that is we're reaching the end of our list. We're getting very, very close. The Amazing Spider-Man #1. This came out in 1998 from Marvel Comics. The high sale of this book is $131.09.8, and that was in November of 2023. Last recorded sale of this book was $10. Fair market value of this book is $10 at very fine, and it is $61 at a 9.8. This is the very first premiere issue of the second series of Spider-Man. So this relaunched Amazing Spider-Man, and not to the same extent of Man of Steel, unfortunately.
No. This I remember this coming out, and I couldn't figure out why they were restarting the book, because again, like, it's 90s, and it just seemed so strange to me. It's like, why would you restart it? It's at like whatever issue it was at. I don't remember the one before 5 something or whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah, and it definitely didn't have the same impact.
It was just, again, it was another cash grab, right? Let's make a first issue. And John Byrne, let's be honest, at this time, he wasn't really doing a lot of things that people were gravitating towards. So even though he had name recognition, it was almost like he was past his prime at this time, where people weren't as interested as they were before.
Right.
And it just didn't work. I can't tell you the stories. I have this book and I even can't tell you what the story's about.
Yeah, same.
So some hits, some misses. Right?
It's gonna happen.
Right. And then we have JLA 94. This came out in 2004 for DC Comics. The high sale of this book was $15. The last recorded sale of this book is $3. Fair market value of this book is $3. There are no slabs that were sewed that we have recorded. This marks Chris Claremont and John Byrne teaming up with Jerry Orwell to make the JLA. I remember this, and I do have this. This is Chris Claremont and John Byrne working together again. I don't even know how the relationship worked, to tell you the truth. I never bothered to ask Chris about that. But they're doing JLA, and of course DC, they banked on the fact that we got Chris Claremont and John Byrne back together again, right? But the truth is, you don't want them back together on JLA. You want them back together on X-Men.
Yeah, exactly.
So it was a nice try. It was a nice attempt. It just didn't pay off. All right. So there you have it. Creator Spotlight, John Byrne. Wow, that was a long one.
Stretch my back.
I know, right? So overall, what are your thoughts on John Byrne's history in comics? Which books do you love? Which books do you thought were misses? Let me know in the comments. Let me know what you think about John Byrne's and the Creator Spotlight, and look forward to our next Creator Spotlight. I'm not sure what we're going to talk about, but we'll talk about somebody, and I hope it won't be 45 slides long either. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more comic content. Check out these other videos for even more insight, and I'll see you at the next one. Excelsior.